Hi, this is DIY Dad Builds, and today we're going to build this IKEA Hack learning tower.
We're going to start the project by assembling the IKEA stool. It's important to follow the directions closely because these cross braces actually are different lengths and you want to make sure they go in the right spot. The biggest trick that I found while putting this together was make sure that you don't tighten the screws down 100% as you're putting it all together. You want to get things started, but leave them a little bit loose so that you can kind of move things around and get them in the exact position that you want as you attach this second side of the stool. When all the screws are in place, then you can go back around and tighten things up to be in the spot that they're going to stay. I decided to put the top step on the stool just because I wanted to see what it looks like, but I'll wind up needing to take it off in order to attach it to the learning tower portion of the build. The rest of the learning tower is going to be made from a solid 8-foot piece of 1x4 poplar, and I'm ripping it down so that I've got a 2-inch wide board which will leave a 1 3/8 inch cutoff, and I'm going to wind up using both pieces in the build. After the boards are ripped down, I've got a stop block set up on my miter saw so that I can cut them to length and make repeatable cuts that will give the exact same size boards. These 1 3/8 wide portions are going to be the height of the learning tower. I've moved the stop block to cut down the 2-inch board into slightly shorter pieces, and these are going to be the horizontal cross braces that go the width of the stool. After I get those cut, I'm going to cut down the smallest pieces, and these are going to be the support braces that run horizontally but go front to back on the stool. After all the pieces are cut, I've taken a 220 grit piece of sandpaper and glued it to a block so that I can sand all the rough edges. I chose 220 because it won't alter the shape of the wood at all, but will still clean it up and give a nice smooth edge. After the pieces are sanded, it's time for assembly. I'm laying out exactly halfway down the height portions of the learning tower, and I've marked halfway up that cross brace. That way I know that brace is going to be exactly halfway down the height of the learning tower. After I've got this side laid out the way that I want, I clamp things down into place so that I know they aren't going to move while I pre-drill my holes and drive my screws. I'm laying out where all my screws are going to go so that everything's nice and even and consistent on each side of the build. This gives a nice, clean, orderly look. I've taken the tip of a screw and put a little dimple in the wood, and what that does is keeps my drill bit from wandering as I pre-drill the hole. After the hole is pre-drilled, I sand it a little bit and then drive in my trim screw. Now, I've used a little bit smaller drill bit than is probably recommended for these trim screws. It's 7/64, and because of that, I've put a little bit of paste wax on the end of the screws, and that helps them slide into the wood nice and easy without running the risk of splitting the wood. I'm going to repeat this process all the way around this side of the learning tower until I've got one side complete. You can see The wax squeezes out a little bit as I drive the screw home, and I clean it up with a paper towel after it's finished. After I've got one side done, I do the same thing for the second side, and now I've got to put the cross braces to connect the two. I've got a longer clamp holding them together while I pre-drill my holes, and that clamp is tightened down pretty hard, and that friction will keep things into place. But it's the same process. Use the tip of the screw to make a dimple, pre-drill the hole, dip the end of the screw in wax, and drive it in. Now those screws are a little bit closer than the ones on the front and back, and that's because they've got to miss where those screws are located. Right here, it's a little bit tricky because of the clamp. I had to drive one screw into place, take the clamp off, and let that first screw hold the board where it's going to stay in order to pre-drill and drive the screw in the second location. Once that's done, I can flip it upside down and do the same thing on the other side. Now, after I get this first screw in, there's a little bit of a gap at the top where those two boards meet, so I take the clamp and tighten it up to bring those two boards nice and tight together. I drive the screw in, and once it's tightened down, as soon as I take the clamp off, there won't be a gap there anymore. On the bottom of the legs, I'm finding the exact center of each of those boards, and again, putting a little dimple in the wood so that my drill bit doesn't wander. Now, it took a little bit of time to determine where exactly these holes were going to correspond in the top step of the stool, but that was really the most complicated portion of the build. It's really worth the effort to take the time and figure things out so that you have an even reveal on all sides of it. Here I am laying out where those holes are going to be pre-drilled on the top step of the stool. And again, I'm going to use the same process of finding my marks, using a screw to make a dimple, and pre-drilling the holes with the drill bit. Make sure you keep your drill as perpendicular to the board as possible, because it's going to affect how the screw goes into the bottom of the legs. Now I'm driving these screws in just a little bit past flush because I'm going to use the points of the screw to help line up where the legs are going to go on the other side. That one wasn't quite far enough, so I brought it in a little bit more. Now I set it on top of the legs. Now this whole thing is upside down right now, but that just makes assembly easier. Once I've got all of the tips of the screws lined up with the holes that I pre-drilled before, I'm able to drive the screws in. And just like every other part of the project, there is wax on the end of the screws, which I'll need to wipe up afterwards. If you don't have paste wax, you can use bar soap. Works just as well, but paste wax is what I had in the garage. I've got the learning tower upside down, and I set the stool upside down on it, and I'm able to use the bolts that come with the IKEA stool to attach that top step to the rest of the stool. Now, I've used poplar, and I will eventually paint this white because I like the way that it looks in the kitchen. But if you've used oak or any other wood, you could always stain it if you wanted. How you finish it is up to you. And you see here that the height of my learning tower lines up exactly with the height of my countertops, as does the prototype build that I built before. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you like this video and would like to see more like it, please subscribe to the channel.